The essence is that everything is connected, and why crystals are distinct from plastic, a piece of wood, some other man-made thing, is that all the little particles in that crystal follow one particular pattern. That's what defines it as a crystal form. Now, that pattern means that the consciousness inherent in that is very clear and pure. So a piece of plastic is made of all sorts of things, and through heat and pressure and chemical bonding, it glues together. Most of it made from oil. Its consciousness is pretty vaporous and non-specific. A crystal, all the different crystals, each one basically gives out a particular frequency of higher light, beyond the human eye's capacity to see. The band of light that a human can see is about the width of a match head. The true band of light is both arms outstretched. So crystals relate to life through frequency, and certain crystals, particularly quartz, can actually be programmed. Just using clear, coherent thought, you can put a program into that quartz so that it radiates or stores that which you want it to do. So I have two beautiful quartz wands, which I programmed so that the light that comes out of these hands goes through them and gets magnified. So when I spin them in a certain way over the top of the crystals on somebody's body, it makes the crystals on their body vibrate very high and clearly, and then invites the etheric body, the blueprint of the person, to come up into coherence with the crystals. So it can heal physical ailments in various parts of the body. It can heal emotional distortions because of that. So bringing that basic understanding back to the times of Atlantis, which, funnily enough, through meditative practice, I have had visions of a lifetime, 2 different lifetimes when I was in Atlantis. And one of them was working with a giant emerald crystal. In the capital city of Atlantis, we knew and understood about crystal energy. And so there was this really tall, beautiful emerald crystal that those of us who were the temple keepers would spend our time putting our divine connections through our heart in a very special meditation way into that emerald to make it vibrate such that it radiated a loving consciousness into the field around the entire city. So everybody is literally living inside a field of divine conscious love. Now, the true story of Atlantis is that there was a group of beings who came from elsewhere, who came pretending to be happy with and part of us and what we were doing, and infiltrated the power structure with much more sinister intentions. You've probably seen images of miniatures, a human upper torso on the body of a horse. That form of genetic splicing was what these particular beings started doing. They said for experimental, to create something better. Well, it's a pretty weird idea, having something which is half human and half an animal form. That form of things they did, and other very weird malfeasances, actually caused over time the collective consciousness to be so distorted that a great fracture appeared in that emerald. And those of us in the temple were so alarmed and distraught by this that we went into a very, very strong intentional practice to attempt to heal that fracture. But by then, the, shall we call it, evil, dark, distorted energies that these other ones had brought in, having created all these malfeasances, was so distorted that there were a range of beings holding the sacred knowledge that left Atlantis knowing full well that the only way to truly heal that was to wash it away. And so were those that went to Hawaii, those that went to Peru, those who went to Egypt and up into the Himalayas, knowing full well that the time of the great destruction would occur. And it did, because that epoch went as high as it could, but in effect, the ego, that sense of I can create something because I want to have the power and the lust and all the rest that goes with it, that their creations went so far away from what the divine intended that that was scrubbed to start again. This is the end of another cycle. That was 12,970 years ago. Here we are now at the end of this cycle, when those same beings who created all of that stuff are the ones who are running the banks, the ones who are running all these chemical companies. We can grow better food with genetic engineering. Same ethos. They can splice various things because that will make it that they can cover it in toxic substances and it will still produce something that looks like food. But it's not proper food. It doesn't feed the essence of the body. It creates apparent carbohydrates and proteins that feeds the basic nutrients, but not the whole nutrition, which in turn creates the sickness industry to make far more profit. Because anybody who's eating stuff covered in Roundup, glyphosate, all the others, they're phytoestrogens. It takes away the male testosterone essence, and it causes damage to the organs, so then people end up in hospital, end up taking all kinds of medications to cope with surviving while still eating toxic food. This is the end of another epoch. This power over by the few, with actually distinctly evil intentions, is now being revealed and being consciously removed from those places of power. You'll own nothing and be happy. All of that mob, they're the ones who don't have the heart at the centre of their intentions. So in effect, it's a repeat of what happened at Atlantis without some of the really fancy things that Atlantean technology was able to achieve. I've spent time in Peru. I've stood in front of structures made of stone that nobody in the Western world can explain how it was done. Huge stones lifted into place with Peruvians who only knew how to make tools out of copper. Copper can't possibly change the shape of this stone. It's harder than quartz. And yet they're exquisitely shaped so they interlock together, and they weigh 50 tons. There's one that's just 200 tons, 8 meters high, standing on other stones, all locked into place in land which often gets earthquakes. But I spent time with Inca wisdom keepers. We did ceremony together. And they explained those stones were shaped by a group of 12, complete focus and toning would make that stone soft and flexible. Through intention, it was shaped exactly to be the right shape and lifted into place. No hydraulic cranes, no chisels, no laser beams. That was the knowledge that they brought from Atlantis and have kept all the way through. So the crystals are power tools. The crystals can also hold, if you like, human form of consciousness. one of the meditations I teach, was given to me by a being who lives inside a giant quartz crystals in Sedona in southern Western America. And very clearly, she was speaking to me telepathically, giving me answers for clients of mine at the time. Then on the last day there, she gave me this elegantly simple but profoundly powerful meditation to bring us into heart coherence and magnify our magnetic field that we all have in our hearts, but to intentionally inflame it so that you can soften people's fear, master's anger, simply by sitting next to them when they're in their anger while you're just consciously generating that field. This is consciousness that lives inside a crystal. I've been in ceremony with two of the ancient crystal skulls, pure clear quartz, shaped to look just like the anatomy of a human skull, and all 13 of them hold consciousness. Crystals interface. A quartz crystal has a magnetic field, a positive end and a negative end. What makes a lighter create a spark is simply putting vibration into a little piece of quartz, and it gives off a spark of electricity, which will ignite the gas inside the chamber, and whoosh, there you go. You've got your flame.
And they use it in watches?
And in watches
and in TV.
And in computers. We are holding all of our knowledge. The device recording right now is using quartz crystal chips inside the integrated circuits. Our lives are heavily dependent on crystal technology.
Yeah. And I love the story that you give about Adelaide or South Australia, about if you want to explain that.
Sure. There are 3 places on this planet that naturally have in the ground underneath huge beds of quartz. I mean, every beach on the world is covered in white sand, which is just little micro bits of quartz. So why walking barefoot on a beach is really good for you. But Adelaide, Arkansas in America, and Minas Gerais in South America are the 3 most powerful places for highly intensive quantities of quartz. So Adelaide was built by Colonel Light, who just spent 12 years in Egypt. And so the city itself is built as a square on the north, south, east, west coordinates, so that it is a city of light. It's a city where it was called the City of Churches, because there were so many people in the early days who came here as devout Christians in their particular denominations. When Andy Thomas, the only Australian astronaut to go cruising around the world in the space shuttle, looked down from up there in the satellite, 2,000 miles high, the roads of Adelaide shone bright from space because they're all paved with quartz. So it actually means that the energies here in this particular city, this smaller, unassuming place that all the egoists up the East Coast go, oh, Adelaide, who cares? Never been there. They don't know the fact that there is a profound vibration here, which is supportive of spiritual awakening, which is healing of traumas from places built on very different energies. It's why Byron Bay and that whole caldera is a place of energy, because it's actually, the caldera is the rim of a giant volcano. And the knob, the headland, the most easterly point of Australia, has underneath it a huge bed of obsidian. It's where the indigenous folk went to do ceremony, to have meetings, but they wouldn't live there. That's where the whiteys have missed the point. The places of intense energy are wondrous places to visit, to purify, to do ceremony, to have learnings and visions, and then to move off and live in a quieter place. So yeah, Adelaide's a very special place. there's great potential here to take this kind of wisdom, to inflame it to the point where thousands of people gather, not to watch somebody kicking a bag of air around. I mean, who really cares? Sport is only an imitation of war. But doing conscious ceremony together is a very, very different thing.
And I know you've been on it, like you were saying, how on certain numbers, significant dates,
Yeah.
You would go to sacred sites that were holding crystal power. Like, so you've been to Mount Chester, and you were just saying then about Sedona. I love these stories, and wondering if you could share a little bit about those adventures.
This is the thing about remembering about Atlantis. That very same giant emerald, when we could see that the bad guys were going to take over Atlantis, we didn't want them to have those giant crystals for them to use for the wrong purpose. So what we did before we left was to put them into an etheric zone, not a physical zone anymore, and put them under an etheric lock. So on the 7th of the 7th, 2007, we reawakened the giant crystal of knowledge, which was a, 18 metre tall, beautiful quartz point, which had actually been heated up to 800 degrees centigrade and then infused with gold, what's commonly called an aqua aura now. And that was put away in an etheric lock. And so on the 777, those of us who were there to put it in that lock were given by spirit guidance the invitation to go into a special meditation to reawaken that. And then on the 999, we did a ceremony to reawaken that very same emerald, which was hidden away on etheric rock in Arkansas in America. So the guidance said, you have to go to Sedona, you have to do a ceremony on Bell Rock. I'd never heard of Bell Rock. I'd heard of Sedona, but the notion of me going there became a spirit compulsion to do so. So I turned up in Sedona, and that Children of the Sun group I mentioned, they had a kind of a share house in Sedona at the time. I went and stayed with them. And I was only there for 3 days before the 999 date. And then somebody said, oh, look, the Inca family, those same knowledge keepers, have been up here for a special ceremony. They're still living with a friend of mine. So I go to visit this friend and meet the Incas. And I was carrying with me an emerald ring, a large ceremonial emerald ring, which is part of my collection. So I got to meet the Inca family, and through 2 lots of translation in language, I got them to want to come along and be part of the ceremony. And then their hostess said, oh, 4 months ago I was at some place and this man walked up to me and said, here, you will need this. And he gave me an emerald bracelet. So she said, maybe you need to use this for your ceremony. I still didn't really know what the ceremony was, but I was just going in trust. So, okay, thank you very much. I had the bracelet, I had the ring. So on the appointed moment, and sure enough, there is a place called Bell Rock, and it's a vortex energy place. So I'd been there the day before and worked out which was the best circular piece of rock high up the mountain to go and do the ceremony on. And I didn't make any big hullabaloo, but the word had got around. So we climbed up the rock, we started to get set up to do the ceremony, and there were 32 people there. And then the 33rd person turned up, a young woman who comes from Arkansas. And he said, I got this guidance, I had to come to Sedona to do something. I don't know what, but I just jumped on a plane and flew here. And then somebody said, oh, there's an Aussie guy doing something up there on Bell Rock. And she produces a kunzite wand. Now, kunzite is a striated, clear, faintly pink crystal of great peace. And this was a wand that was kind of slightly twisted and about yay long, that fitted perfectly through the emerald ring. So at the last moment, there was the ceremony. Because we started all this at 8 minutes past 8 to complete it at 9 minutes past 9 on the 9th day of the 9th year of the 2000s. So the ceremony became, we passed the ring around in the clockwise male direction, the bracelet around in the anti-clockwise female direction, so that all 33 people could impart their intention into both of these crystals to reawaken their sister giant crystal. And at the last moment, we placed the ring inside the emerald bracelet and placed the kunzite rod through it, pointing from where we were directly to Arkansas, and we all saw this crystal reawaken. Now, it didn't mean it suddenly appeared coming out of the ground, because it's still in the etheric realm, because the bad guys are still here. They haven't been invited to leave fully yet. But it became activated on that day. So that energy of love is going back out into the field of human consciousness. So it all happened. It was all wonderful. Then I met Leilani. Then I had that meditation given to me. All of the other things that happened while I was in Sedona for 1 month. Then I came back home, and in meditation in my healing room, not so long later, hey, here's this vision of a most unusual amethyst. It has 7 points to it. 5 are long and columnar, and then 2 are shorter, so it makes kind of a fan. And that was the ancient crystal of spiritual awareness, also from Atlantis. And that was put in an etheric lock inside Lake Titicaca, the highest elevation lake on the planet. This massive expanse of beautiful waters up in the highlands of Peru. So, lo and behold, the 10-10-10 was when we had to activate that. So I did a journey around other highly intensive, beautiful, high-energy places to arrive in Peru, to be on this little island that takes 9 hours by boat to get to from the mainland. Very remote little place. And there's no power, there's no roads, there's no cars. Everybody lives walking and by hand I do things. Anyway, on that morning, I went this long walk down the island, it's only 4 kilometres long, to the one beach. And when I got to the beach, there were 6 people waiting for me. Come, come, let us begin the ceremony. I didn't know any of these people, but they'd all been guided from where they lived in the world. One from the island, one from Venezuela, some from America, some from Scandinavia. So the 7 of us met to do a ceremony of the 7-pointed amethyst. I go back home. My partner at the time, a month or so later, says, hey, look at this. And another guy who does energetic ceremony work, he went to Sedona from where he lives to do a big ceremony to reawaken, and he had an image exactly the same as the image I had drawn of the 7-pointed amethyst. It's physical proof of the interconnectedness of consciousness and the appropriateness of right now that these crystals are being reawakened. Because it's time for humanity to reawaken to who we truly are.